Welcome to the Healthy Menu podcast. This is part 2 of the incredibly insightful conversation that I had with Natalie Lowe, owner, operator, president and secretary treasurer at Celebrate Niagara, a destination management company based in the Niagara Peninsula that specializes in corporate and association events. Here's the amazing conversation I had with Natalie.
So let's talk about the fear of change, shall we?
Yes.
Because you addressed that. And so in sustainability, we run into something called the attitude behavior gap.
Right.
So I ask you, Curran, do you want to make the world livable 20 years from now? And you're going to say, yes, Natalie, I do.
Yeah, absolutely.
But then I say, okay, Curran, you got to give up your reusable cup from Tim Hortons. And you're like, yeah, that's a little bit difficult. Because I keep ending up down there and I keep forgetting it. Or I'm already in the elevator and it's not in my hand. So what do I do? So the thing that we have to acknowledge is that everything about climate change is a problem that is going to be difficult for us, right? Mm-hmm. Because it's behavior that we need to change today for a future benefit and potentially a future benefit that we won't really ever see. It's like flossing your teeth or, is that, great, you have no cavities, but it's not like it's nebulous. So we need to be able to really encourage each other and create what we call social norms or a normalizing of behavior. And that's where communicating with your customers and creating that culture really helps. The reason we had the event earlier this week, and we struggled with it, right? Because every time you have an event, you're creating a carbon footprint. And so not having an event is the most sustainable thing to do. Way less fun. But you try to do it in the most sustainable way that you can. And the reason we had to do that is because we are social creatures. And so we needed to create connection. And I think, if you look at some food service companies, that especially fast food service companies, who they've created a bit of a culture around it. You remember when, Chipotle came out and it was like the cool place to go and it became your Chipotle habit. And, there were all kinds of social norms around going there and eating their products. And I think we need to create some of that same social norm. There's actually a company, and I haven't seen any of it. I did a webinar from a bunch of environmental lawyers out of Brussels, and they talked about a program in Northern Europe where there were hard plastic reusable containers. And I know TerraCycle's involved in some of them where they use the Loop program. And you basically go and buy something in a reusable container and you pay the deposit. And then when you return it, you get your deposit back. And they're trying to create that sense of community where you use this program, you become sort of part of that virtue of reusing things.
Yeah, kind of staying on the whole food service kind of sector. And
I want to talk about the staff training.
Sure, please go.
As one of your one of your questions early on, you said, is this going to be an obstacle? I think that in most cases, the staff are wanting changes that are more sustainable and can advocate for them. Yeah. You're right. Sometimes people don't want change, but when we engage people, they often have these great ideas because they're in the middle of a system and they can see where things could be tweaked. And, one of the first things that, and I always hate it, form a committee. I always hate to hear that. I hate to hear two things, form a committee and have a meeting. I go, but in this case, I think you need to create green teams and you need to empower them and let them go out. And I think part of that change and that fear factor is you got to let people have some fun with this, right? Like do some wild and crazy things and do, absolutely let the staff lead on some of these things. Now, do you sometimes need, for big production facilities, obviously you need technical expertise and whatnot, but create that green team and let them, sort of let them run with some crazy ideas. If you think about one of the most successful products in the world is Post-it notes. You probably have some, right?
Yep.
We all have some. I'm surrounded by them. They were a mistake, right? The guy was trying to create glue that would never come apart, and he created glue that constantly comes apart and reconnects. And when it comes to addressing, and I know sometimes business people in larger companies are concerned about this, is that level of expertise. And I was reminded of something a couple of months ago, and that was the airplane was created and I guess the concept of flight discovered by a couple of guys who were bicycle mechanics. They were not scientists. They were just really stubborn. Right? Like they were going to fly. And, it's one of those things when I heard it, it sort of set me back on my heels. I went, whoa, that's right. The Wright brothers, they create, or they made and fixed bicycles. And that was how we sort of got to where we were. And all those people kind of worked off each other. So don't be afraid of, I go back to the case of my son, is that he knows how the garbage works in the kitchen he works in, because he's the one touching it. He comes with some great ideas. I mean, he still doesn't take the garbage out at home, but I'm not paying him. So but I think, and the other thing is we say, oh, there's a lack of availability of environmentally products. Now, that might have changed over the last year because there are a lot of new products coming up. But I go back to that refuse, replace, because you're right. Sometimes the shiny new product that we think is a savior actually becomes more of a hindrance. We find out later that it's got, toxic side effects, or there's some issue. And so I always advocate for how can we simplify the system rather than create more issue. And certainly for food waste in the Toronto area, the Second Harvest has foodrescue.ca. And the people at Second Harvest are they understand a lot about the problems that we're trying to solve on the food waste side. And they can really help with a lot of those issues.
Interesting. So Second Harvest, kind of what is their...
Second Harvest is a food program for people who really don't have enough to eat, right? And so they facilitate getting food to underprivileged people in society, or food people who are suffering from food insecurity. And they came up with the idea of reusing food that was not waste, but that could be given to people. And there's actually legislation across Canada. It was spearheaded by the legislation wasn't, but there is legislation in Canada. My understanding is it covers every single province and territory that covers you from liability on food donations. And in my industry, in the event industry, there's a woman, Sandra Wood, who worked for the Canadian Medical Association, and she really spearheaded, because if you've ever been to a big awards gala or conference, you've seen the amount, 400 people buy tickets and 320 of them show up for dinner. There's so much waste. And you're trying to sort of correct it. So, Kira Toffelmeyer and a gentleman by the name of Winston oversees the food reuse program at Second Harvest. And I'll connect you with them. They do some really cool work there.
Definitely.
And it goes back to that concept of, as a business person, we can affect the kind of world, especially as an entrepreneur, right? I have ultimate control. And so do I want to see that food go into the garbage, or do I want to see it reused? And they sort of help train you and understand on how you work through that process to pass that food along in a way that's safe and can still be consumed on the other end.
Yeah. Okay, so I guess from that, I mean, this is probably an obvious answer for yourself, but I guess for the benefit of other business owners out there and restaurateurs, how important is sustainability to food service business? I mean, how necessary is it to consider? Obviously, we spoke about at length about kind of the sustainability of the planet, but what is it that business owners need to consider when it comes to sustainability?
Well, I think that more and more we're entering an age where businesses are being held to account for their actions, right? Businesses and governments. And I think that there's a couple of sides to it. One, there is the psychological stance and where perception is going. I'm out there educating people to ask at the restaurants, do you compost? Is this locally sourced? So, I might be a little bit of sand in their oyster shell. I'm going to think of myself as having a positive effect long term. But I'm encouraging people to ask I said, ask your favorite restaurant, do you compost? We just found out a couple of them don't. And so putting them in touch with the right people. But I think on a larger scale, we're seeing issues like the Exxon lawsuit in New York, and where people are coming back and saying, you made a profit off something that hurt the planet. I mean, in that case, it's shareholders, not end users. But as our waste system gets overwhelmed, that, will there be ramifications for restaurants who are, not composting and putting that food waste into the garbage? That's not an area that, I spend a ton of time in, but I think those are questions we want to ask ourselves. I don't think we quite want a virtue signal. We talked about integrity. We don't want to be saying that we're doing all these wonderful things if we aren't.
Sure.
But I think what's really fair is to say, here's where we're at, and we're taking steps to work towards something better, and to make ourselves vulnerable a little bit with our clients. And because I work very closely with my clients, just like a restaurant does. I mean, it's an intimate thing to be presenting somebody with something that they will actually ingest. You're being put into a position of trust, and to say to them, hey, we're going to try and work on this. We started our composting, or on Thursday nights, all our regulars can bring their own containers, and take your leftovers home. Start to work on some of those smaller steps. And I think what you will find is that you can create community around that. And, as marketers, we don't just want you to be a purchaser of our product. We want you to be a fan.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And so I think it's an opportunity to connect. And I talk about creativity and community as sort of great at solving problems. And something that we didn't get to when you talked about change and fear, and it's something that I sort of use as an example when we are scared or angry, and anger is sometimes just a reaction to that fear. I always say, get more curious, right? And so when you look at your customer base, get curious about, hey, if our restaurant did XYZ, would that help you? Would that be an inconvenience? Would you support this? And then hold them to it. I know that margins aren't always wide. So I think what we really have to do is look at first and foremost how we can, stop the gaps, reuse things, reduce high cost areas, and help the restaurants, be profitable while they're making these changes.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it's interesting you say, it kind of brings me to my final point, is that, we've kind of touched on it a little bit, but in terms of, as an industry, a kind of food service industry, and also society, kind of what steps can we take to further push sustainability? I know we kind of mentioned people bringing in their own, Tupperware or storage boxes and contributing that way. And what other ways do you think a business can kind of approach sustainability? What practical advice for businesses?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think the first thing that we need to do is to educate ourselves. And, certainly so that we understand what the issues are. And if we go back to, obviously refrigerants is a capital intensive issue. If you're an older restaurant, that will be one of the areas that will realize the greatest return, but it also might be something that is expensive. So I think, then we look at, and it was interesting, the general manager of the hotel that we hosted at talked about how he has been able to realize cost savings by reducing the weight of the garbage that he's being sent. And so I think, you want to look at your food waste and your garbage and see how can I reduce that. You absolutely want to reduce your energy consumption, because that is not only is it a huge cost, but also that's where you're going to have so many savings. And, I know that right now things are in flux with a new federal government, but looking at having some programs in place for the Ministry of the Environment to offset those capital costs and to help. And I think, the City of Toronto and Second Harvest will have some resources for restaurants to utilize in order to make changes, because for them, food waste is really the biggest issue where they're going to have impact. They're not going to be able to affect as much, something like regenerative agriculture. Over time they will, but even if the food industry starts to educate themselves, and I mean they really know and understand, but on that entire food system and looking at opportunities, because sometimes they're being sold on solutions that are expensive that might not affect, like, for example, switching from plastic straws to paper straws. It's decreased a certain service, if you will, because using a paper straw isn't always that much fun, but it came through widespread social norming. And I know, thank goodness I'm not the only one. Like, I don't know if I'm just a chewer or what, but I'm like, this thing just disintegrated on me. So now I'm just like, you know what? And it goes back to that. Okay, would my grandmother laugh at me having to? Yes, she would. So let's just do without the straw. Apparently, I am perfectly capable as a full-grown adult of drinking from the edge of a glass. It apparently works.
Wow.
But like sippy cups for adults. We're getting pretty bad there. Oh, I'm gonna get some hate mail on that one.
Oh man, I'm sure people are gonna agree with you. Like,
Well,
excellent.
But it's not like, I would never look at you, Curran, and say, okay, you. But I look at this and we just say, we don't put any straws in our drinks. It's just, we found the edge of that glass works just fine. And we did it for years and years and years. And so I think restaurants, again, it goes back to creating that committee and saying, okay, I'm going to challenge this green committee to where can we eliminate three things, and where could we bring in three things? And, I really like the idea of there's a restaurant down the street from us. Friday nights are their night. Like, you have to make the reservation when you leave on Friday for the next Friday.
Wow.
And it I just see the opportunity on Fridays for them to start offering, hey, we're going to try this new program. Would you like to be part of it? And I think that, there's some real opportunity there. It goes back to that raving fans concept that we want. And so what if they had, hey, Wednesday nights, we're going to try some vegan meals, or Thursdays, we're going to do some plant-based stuff, or Saturday is maybe Saturday's not a great night, but they do another night where they have a program with Second Harvest, and they do something that provides good back to the community. And I find we want to make virtuous buying decisions because we don't always have the time to sit down and say, gee, I should be giving some money to charity. But at the grocery store, they're always asking, would you like to give $1 to, XYZ? And we're open to it. Well, what if we said, hey, we're having the farmer come in and in Niagara, we do a ton of that, right? Because it's kind of that farm to table ethos. We're growing region as well as wine region, and actually being in touch with the people who grow and produce your food. I always think that's a cool thing, and we do it at the wineries, but I haven't actually had it done in a restaurant where it's like, hey, the guy who grew your carrots is here. And
that's awesome.
Yeah, and there's some real opportunity. And one of the great things that I think is happening is we are starting to use much more different plants and vegetables and fruits. And I consider myself a pretty informed consumer, but yeah, I've picked up the the organics box or the mixed vegetable box from whatever service you happen to use, and I've looked at it and said, I have never cooked this. It was like, I think it was Romanesque or something. Like the kids were like, let's not eat it. It's beautiful, right? I'm like, it's beautiful, and we're gonna eat it, right?
Yeah.
But I think I took 400 Instagram pictures of that, and I think that there's an opportunity. It's like, okay, is it broccoli or is it cauliflower or is it both, right? And I think that we have, and you know what, maybe that, I think marketing is going to be involved heavily in the sustainability side of things. We need to create some curiosity and some excitement and some fun. And we talk about, kids won't eat their vegetables, but I don't know. I'm an aunt many times over. I really enjoy kids. I find the kids can get more excited about it. It's when dad says, I'm not touching that vegetable, then the kids think that they shouldn't touch it. So maybe we need to engage both the kids and the parents on it, and
absolutely
have some fun with it, because that's but those are just a few ideas, but I think absolutely the addressing the food waste and the plant-based diet are going to be your low-hanging fruit. I know veganism is problematic because of cross-contamination,
right?
And I think I was recently asked to help a reporter regarding that, and I think that's where I think we need to be really honest and say, okay, we have a vegetarian menu. Sir, ma'am, you're vegan. Here's what we can do, and just be open about addressing it, and maybe try. I think those from a cost perspective, I think having those special events around those might be an easy way to sort of test the market and see what works and what doesn't.
Excellent. Natalie, it's been so good having you on this episode. I guess the final thing from you is, where can people find you and things that you talk about?
Yeah, absolutely. So I am on all the social media, but primarily, LinkedIn is where I talk about a lot of these issues. We're at sustainableplanner.ca, and I'm not great at Instagram.
I'm sure you can be. It sounds like you've got a lot to tell, and I feel like your audience would love to hear more from you.
Well, thank you so much. And, we're going to talk about that disposable cup habit of yours. That's
Excellent. Well, I'll make sure I'll put the links to your social medias and website in the description of this podcast anyway. But thank you again so much, Natalie, for joining us on the Healthy Menu podcast. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Well, Corinne, thank you so much. I've enjoyed this a lot. Thank you for your open attitude. And, I think I just want to impress upon us that it's not a contest.
Yes.
We're all trying to do better. And it's okay wherever we're at. We just try to do the right thing and help each other out. And I think the most important thing for people to do is to talk about the climate crisis that we're in, and to share with each other. And, I have a few ideas. Your listeners probably have many, 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 many great ideas, and they should share them with you, and it helps all of us. So thank you for your interest.
No, not at all. And thank you for your time once again. And you have a lovely day.
Thank you. Thanks so much, Karen.
If you enjoyed that and you want to know more about what we discussed, we've left some links around the talking points in the description of this podcast, and you can find more information on the menus on our blog, which you can also find in the description of the podcast. You can also find us across a number of platforms such as Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn. Links are in the description of the podcast. Thank you so much for listening, and thank you for taking the time out to listen to the Healthy Menu podcast.